And good evening again, and good afternoon again, and welcome to TalkBackLive in the afternoon. And it is now 40 minutes past the hour, 1 o'clock Central Time, and a very pleasant good afternoon to you on a Friday afternoon. Yes, a lovely, wonderful Friday. And hey, the verdict is in the case of Derek Chauvin. Is being decided right now, and folks, we can go live into the courtroom, and you can give your opinion, and our lines are open.
And yes, sir. And before we go to the phone lines, though, we got the live stream. We don't want to interrupt the actual cases going on right now with the phone calls, respectfully, but we will get you guys' thoughts after all of that is in. As of right now, but we're going to go to the courtroom right now because there's a lot of some talking going on in the courtroom that we see. So I can put up on the screen right now while we're up. You can see Derek Chauvin right there, and some family members of George Floyd are testifying in the courtroom right now. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the volume up, and we can all hear it together.
My brother was murdered. I was on the phone with him. And we had a long conversation. And as I looked at the video of my niece, the last conversation me and my brother had was he wanted to have play dates. He wanted to plan play dates with Gianna and my daughter. And we started setting it up. That can't happen. And I have to. My daughter's still young, but I still have to explain to her because this is history. This is a case everybody knows about. So she's gonna find out, and I'm gonna have to explain that to her. And I think that's, to me, harder than even just standing here, that I have to talk to my daughter and tell her, about her niece, about her uncle, about the situation. That's basically reliving it all over again, years down the line. I'm here on behalf of my family, on behalf of me and my family, we seek the maximum penalty. We don't want to see no more slaps on the wrists. We've been through that already. In my community, in my culture, we've been through that already. Smacked on the wrist. No. Because if it was us, the roles was reversed, there wouldn't be no case. It would have been open and shut. We'd have been under the jail for murdering somebody. So we asked for that same penalty for Derek Chauvin. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Your Honor, the final victim impact statement for the state will come from George Floyd's brother, Phalonis Floyd.
And sir, if you could begin by giving us your full name and spell each of your names. And I have permitted you to use your phone because you have notes on it. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you may proceed when you're ready. Giving us your full name first.
Phalonis Floyd, spelled Philonise. Last name Floyd, Floyd.
And you may proceed.
One year ago, May 25th, my brother George was murdered by Derek Chauvin and his co-defendants in broad daylight with a knee to his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. I was a trucker, and immediately my life changed forever. I began to speak to the world for George from the United Nations, Africa, Canada, Japan, and so many other countries. Every day, I have begged for justice to be served, reliving the execution of George, while others begged and pleaded for Officer Chauvin to simply just allow George to take a breath. I haven't had a real night's sleep because of the nightmares I constantly have hearing my brother beg and plead for his life over and over again. Even saying, "They're going to kill me. Please, officer." Screaming for our mom. I have had to sit through each day of Officer Derek Chauvin's trial and watch the video of George dying for hours over and over again. For an entire year, I had to relive George being tortured to death every hour of the day, only taking naps and not knowing what a good night's sleep is anymore. I've been lifting my voice tirelessly every day so that George's death will not be in vain. Honorable Judge Peter Cahill, I thank you for allowing me to share this today. George's life mattered. So my family and I, most of all, my niece, Gianna. My niece, Gianna, she needs closure. I'm asking that you please find it suitable to give Officer Chauvin the maximum sentence possible, charge that he has been found guilty for. My family and I have been given a life sentence. We will never be able to get George back. Daddy's our daughter's first love. He would never be able to walk Gianna down the aisle at her wedding, attend those magical moments of her life like a daddy-daughter dance, sweet 16 party, seeing her out for prom graduations, and she would never be able to have any personal memories with her father. With a smirk on his face and children present, Officer Chauvin used excessive force and acted against his training. Chauvin had no regards for human life, George's life. I stand before you today asking you to please help us find closure by giving Chauvin the maximum sentence possible, making sure he does his time consecutively without the possibilities of parole, probation, or getting out early for good behavior. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Frank.
Thank you, Your Honor. Here today, of course, for sentencing, gives us an opportunity to speak about other matters that I think are involved in sentencing and where we are in the criminal justice system in the processing of this case. As a member of an elected office representing the people of the state of Minnesota, as well as the people of the local community, I want to say a couple of things. And first of all, I want to really thank some of the police officers in the Minneapolis Police Department who, under great pressure, great stress, and to some extent at peril to their occupations, what they've devoted their life to, stuck to their oath and their commitment as police officers to speak openly and honestly about policing and the training that is given and received by police officers. Those officers didn't hide behind a blue wall. They came forward, they told this court and those jurors what they knew about training and responsibility. And I think they deserve recognition and credit for that. I would also like to thank members of the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. You know, those agents get called in, great sacrifice to their personal lives. Whenever things happen, they go. They did that here, and under really extraordinary circumstances, completed a very professional and thorough investigation. You know, conducting interviews is hard enough, but conducting them in the atmosphere of the city following the murder of George Floyd was even more difficult. And they did so, I think, above and beyond the call of duty. And I want to thank them for doing that on behalf of the whole prosecution staff. Your Honor, I want to thank the family, the loved ones, the friends of George Floyd. They have been through so much more than families involved in murder cases. He's right. It's a fraternity you don't want to be part of. But they've been through so much more because of the pandemic and because of security, safety precautions that we've had to take. They have been through a lot. At a time when they try to grieve, like everybody does for the loss of someone, they are going through so much more. And I want to thank them, all of them, the family. The court saw a testimony from Phalonis Floyd, Courtney Ross. These are people who are trying to deal with their loss, but they have to do it in a very public way and under very trying circumstances through no fault of their own. So I thank them. They have all been models of grace and understanding. And it's really remarkable, quite frankly. I'll, I think, come back to them again in a little bit. Your Honor, we have submitted a sentencing brief. I would incorporate that. I guess I would incorporate my comments today into that memo. But I do think there are things that I want to bring out today in my arguments. For hundreds of years, the court had discretion in sentencing. It was the trial court's decision on what a sentence should be. The recognition that the trial court sat through the trial, watched the evidence, and saw how it affected people, informed the court's discretion. And the legislature passed the guidelines in a legitimate attempt to try and even out sentences. They defined certain presumptive sentences, as we all know.
You're listening live to
crimes.
the
For each
sentencing
crime,
case.
typical crime.
George
But they did
Chauvin,
not remove
Derek Chauvin, that is, the police officer that murdered George Floyd. Am I getting the name right? George Floyd. And he is being sentenced today. And
this is worse than that.
so this is what you're watching live on TalkBack Live.
When there are aggravating factors, to give a more serious sentence than what the guidelines presumption calls for. And as you know, we are asking you to do that today. As this court found, there are 4 aggravating factors that we have identified. They go beyond a list of just what those factors are. We have not just done our homework and found a list. The court made good findings, detailed findings about those factors. And we think they justify a greatly increased sentence. This is not the typical second-degree unintentional murder. Supreme Court in our state has said that, and very recently, even one aggravating factor is sufficient to go twice the top of the range. Here we have 4. The first one that the court found is an abusive position of trust and authority. And the court specifically found that when Mr. Chauvin was acting as a police officer, he had a position of trust and authority. That is certainly true. We trust police officers. We trust them when we need help. We call them for help. We trust that they're going to take care of the problems that they are assigned to deal with, right? We trust them. We also give them great authority. We give them great power. We give them power to use force that individuals would be prosecuted for using, right? We give them authority to arrest, to detain. And with great power, of course, comes great responsibility. So they're not sent out there by themselves to do this. They're given substantial training. This court saw all of that through the trial in general and in specific to Mr. Chauvin and the other 3 officers. They're given training on the use of force, the proportional use of force. The force used has to be warranted by the threat. They're given training on de-escalation because we recognize that police officers are called in when people are not having their best day, when people might be affected by mental illness, drug abuse, any number of issues. They're just having a bad day, and they're trained for that and should be. And they're taught how to use that to de-escalate and control a situation. They're taught medical intervention. They're taught to provide medical attention to people who need it. Being a police officer is a difficult job. We ask a lot of them. It's a profession, there's no doubt about it. But we give them a substantial amount of training, and most officers do it right. This case wasn't about police officers, all police officers. It wasn't about policing. This case was about Derek Chauvin disregarding all that training he received and assaulting Mr. Floyd until he suffocated to death. One of the things that you heard, Your Honor, and the jurors heard that can really encapsulate, I think, a very important issue here. 7 words: in your custody, it's in your care. And it's a real simple mantra. It's a real easy thing to remember. You're going to take custody of somebody, you have to provide care. You have to do it in a caring way. You can't simply disregard their care. Mr. Chauvin abused his position of trust and authority as a police officer by doing just that, just disregarding all his training. It was an abuse of that because what did he decide to do? We often are forced in this, criminal justice system to infer people's state of mind by their conduct and their statements. What was Derek Chauvin's end game here? What was the plan? It seems apparent the plan was hold him down until we can dump him in an ambulance and no longer have him be our problem. You recall he said to Charles McMillan, "He's a big guy, might be on something." That's it. He held Mr. Floyd down as Mr. Floyd begged for his life. He had the other officers help in that regard. And rather than doing the simple expedient of putting him on his side, he said, yeah, He was dismissive to that duty of care. We trust that arrestees will be treated with respect, reasonable force, and that their medical needs will be addressed. I'm paraphrasing from the court's findings. That trust was violated. We trust that they will use their authority reasonably. And this was a particularly egregious abuse of that force. Again, paraphrasing the court's findings. The typical second-degree murder does not involve that extent of abuse of a dearly held position of abuse or a position of authority and trust by the community and by individuals of the community. Your Honor found that Mr. Floyd was treated by Mr. Chauvin with particular cruelty. I think tortured is the right word. We know that, we've all seen it. Mr. Floyd did not want to be in the back seat. That's it. That's the rub. It was the need to get him in that back seat no matter what. And we all saw that once he was pulled out of that back seat, he calmed right down. He even willingly went down to the ground. I'm going down, he said. And he went down to the ground, not fighting, not punching. And he was placed initially on his side. He's already handcuffed. He's placed on his side in the recovery position, like he should be, because he's trying to breathe. And then quickly placed prone on the ground, face down. Mr. Chauvin put his left knee on George Floyd's neck, his right knee on George Floyd's back, face down on the pavement. Had Officer King sit on Mr. Floyd's waist area and had Officer Lane hold his feet down. You can even see Mr. Floyd trying to pull his feet up. We all are going to fight to breathe. Everybody knows that fear when you all of a sudden realize you're having trouble breathing. It's just innate, right? We want to survive. We know we have to breathe. And there's an automatic reaction when you begin to feel like that is threatened. And you can see Mr. Floyd going through that. He tries to pull his feet up. But he's held down by these three officers while Officer Tao is looking on. Later, of course, goes to keep the people who want to help away. He's placed face down on this pavement so harshly that it rubs the skin off his face. He has injuries to his face from being face down on that pavement. He has injuries to his knuckles from just trying to lift himself up. And he's telling Officer Chauvin, I can't breathe. I'm dying. And Mr. Chauvin's response was, And all this time, imagine what Mr. Floyd is going through. If we're going to talk about particular cruelty and torture, really try to appreciate what he's going through. He knows he's suffocating. We all know that feeling of not being able to breathe enough. And he's begging, he's pleading, and he's being ignored. His concerns are being dismissed by somebody who has taken custody but not care. He was kept in that prone position for 9.5 minutes and was suffocated. There's no other way to say it. That's particularly cruel. That is more cruel than the typical second-degree unintentional murder. Significantly more. This is not a momentary gunshot, punch to the face. This is 9.5 minutes of cruelty to a man who was helpless and just begging for his life. This court found that there were children present, standing only a few feet from these officers. These children, who were ages 17 and one child age 9. Why is that an aggravating factor? Well, I think everybody can figure that out. Right? It's particularly bad to commit a crime in front of children. We've heard a lot of academia about the development of the young brain and how long it can take. And here you got a couple of teenage girls, a 9-year-old girl. How are they going to process this? Standing feet from a man being suffocated by police officers. Such a stark sight that one of the children even says, we got to call the police on the police. How do you process that as a 9-year-old? The children were not only present watching a man die. We've all seen, if you haven't, you really need to look at George Floyd's face. as he's dying, he's suffering. The children have to watch this. But not only that, it's police officers, and there are people around them wanting to help. And at one point, and sure, they got upset. At one point, Mr. Chauvin points his mace, grabs his mace to keep him back. How does a child look at that? There's another officer screaming at them to get back. The typical second-degree unintentional murder doesn't involve children standing feet away watching a 9.5-minute suffocation of a man begging for his life. This court also made a finding that the defendant committed the offense with the involvement of 3 or more other persons. Lane and King were involved directly in the restraint, and that Tao kept the bystanders at bay. I've already talked a little bit about Lane and King's role in holding Mr. Floyd down. They recognized that he was pulseless, and Mr. Floyd was pulseless at one point, and yet really made no effort to take care of the person in their custody. Officer Tao watched most of the suffocation and then only went over to keep people from giving help. One person who is identified as a medical trained firefighter for the city of Minneapolis, and that was dismissed. Like, are we going to believe her? So they kept trained medical people from providing help. These were all uniformed peace officers, adding to that abuse of trust and authority. You know, I know the defense has asked the court for probation. I'm not going to spend a lot of time arguing that. It's so outside of the realm of, I think, real possibility. This is a murder. I understand some of the arguments made on behalf of Mr. Chauvin. I understand, well, no, I can't understand what his family members and friends are going through. I can. But it's certainly not enough for a departure to probation for a second-degree murder. We believe, Your Honor, that these 4 aggravating factors, the court and the findings that the court has made, certainly justify an upward departure, because there are 4 of them, not standing alone, but in a sense, not overlapping, but coming together to show this is not the typical second-degree murder. This is egregious. And this justifies a double upward departure. From the top of the box, which is 180 months, we're asking the court to do a double departure, recognizing all 4 factors, to 360 months. As I mentioned before, Your Honor, this is sentencing. This is the time for victims, right? This is the time for the loved ones of the victim and the community to have a say. Again, I commend this family. I commend all of the loved ones, the friends, the people that have been involved in this case for tolerating and being gracious. None of this, of course, can bring George Floyd back. That's very true. But this is the time for our criminal justice system to say, we hear you. This is the time for their criminal justice system to say, we recognize that this harm you're going through is real. And while we can't feel what you're feeling, we know we can do what your criminal justice system should do and recognize the severity of this crime and reflect that in the sentence to be given. It's time for this criminal justice system to say, we recognize this is more serious than the typical second-degree unintentional murder. The 4 reasons the court found reflect that and give this court more than an adequate basis to do that. Your Honor, we ask the court to impose a sentence of 360 months, commitment to the Commissioner of Corrections. As you know, Your Honor, there are no fines in murder cases. And we would ask the court just to reserve the issue of restitution. We can clarify that with the family and present that to the court for 30 days. Thank you, Your Honor.
Anything further from the state?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Nelson. Okay. I'm sorry. Mr. Blackwell.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, just thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, at this time, the defendant's mother, Carolyn Palenti, would like to address the court.
If you could state your full name, spelling each of your names, and proceed when you're ready.
Carolyn, C-A-R.
We're hearing right now the mother of
Palenti,
former Officer Derek Chauvin speaking right now. This is the first time we've heard from her speaking on behalf of her son in the defense. Let's listen.
I am the mother of Derek Chauvin. I am here to speak on behalf of my entire family. On November 25th, 2020, not only did Derek's life change forever, but so did mine and my family's. Derek devoted 19 years of his life to the Minneapolis Police Department. It has been difficult for me to hear and read what the media, public, and prosecution team believe Derek to be an aggressive, heartless, and uncaring person. I can tell you that is far from the truth. My son's identity has also been reduced to that as a racist. I want this court to know that none of these things are true and that my son is a good man. Derek always dedicated his life and time to the police department. Even on his days off, he would call in to see if they needed help. Derek is a quiet, thoughtful, honorable, and selfless man. He has a big heart, and he always has put others before his own. The public will never know the loving and caring man.
You're listening live to the Derek Chauvin
sentencing.
The police officer that killed George Floyd. And I don't know why they letting the mother speak. And I don't care how good a person is.
Yeah.
You know, he committed a crime. That doesn't change the fact that he committed a crime. You do the crime, you do the time, police officer or not. And so I hope this doesn't lessen the sentencing at all. Let's go back to...
Just to chime in real quick to what you're saying. I agree 100% with what you just said, because I don't really see, the purpose. Well, I guess I see the purpose from the defense side of things. They want to try to get some sympathy from the judge because there's no jury. Mm-hmm. The judge is making the decision. So, of course, like you said, both sides get to, and I see Frankie makes a statement here, said both sides get to present impact statements. So that's kind of what they're trying to do here. Frankie also says she thinks he'll get sentenced between 20 to 25 years.
I hope he gets more than that.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
Greg says once someone is in your custody as an officer, you are totally responsible for that person until custody is officially handed over.
Yeah. True.
So there's that. Stanley Finster says he believes he will only have to serve 2/3 of the time given. And we had Kaylee from a YouTube comment, watching live as well, because we're live on YouTube as well as Periscope and Facebook. Says, I really feel for Floyd's family.
Yeah.
As well as we saw some of them up there speaking previously. So the prosecution, which is the state, has finished their side of the impact statements with the family members, and now Derek Chauvin's getting his turn with his mother, who's up there right now.
And welcome some of the people that are listening for the first time and watching from LinkedIn.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for joining us as well. Let's go back.
And I want you to do the same for me. I will do what you told me to do, take care of myself. So I will be here for you when you come home. Remember, there is no stronger bond or love than a mother's love. One final thought I want you to remember. Remember, you are my favorite son. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. It is my intent that my remarks this afternoon be quite brief. I do not intend to relitigate the facts of this case, nor spend any substantial time looking at the law. The court is very familiar with the facts of this case, and the parties have fully briefed the court relevant to the sentencing factors. And we recognize that in any case, any sentencing that comes before the court is tasked with a difficult job. The court must craft a sentence that serves the interests of justice, a rather nebulous term. The court must take into consideration the victim impact, public interest, as well as the circumstances and the history of the defendant. And in this case, more than any other, that likely any of us have ever been involved in, that task is exceedingly more difficult. In my remarks today, I just wish to briefly address each of those three considerations, starting with the public impact. As I believe we are all cognizant of, this case is at the epicenter of a cultural and political divide. We tried to keep a lot of that out of the courtroom during the trial and make this case about the facts. But we recognize what has happened as a result of this case. There are a great number of people who will view any sentence you pronounce as overly lenient and insufficient to satisfy justice. But there are an equal number of people who will view any sentence you pronounce as draconian or overbearing. Either way, some percentage of the public will view your sentence as a miscarriage of justice. The intensity of the public interest in this case cannot be understated. I trust that the volume of correspondence that each of us has received from the public at large is indicative of these very sentiments on both sides. As I was informed just yesterday, the Attorney General's office established a website, some web submission to accept community impact statements. Again, in my understanding is in a little over 2 weeks, they received over 1,000 submissions. Again, on both sides. By my very best estimate, since my representation of Mr. Chauvin began last summer, I would estimate that I have received over 5,000 emails, over 1,000 voicemails, and hundreds of handwritten letters. Again, from both sides. And I expect that Your Honor has likewise been inundated with public comment and scrutiny. The impact that this case has had on this community is profound. It goes far beyond what happened on May 25th of last year. It has been at the forefront of our national consciousness, and it has weaved its way into nearly every facet of our lives, from the entertainment that we consume to the presidential politics, from protests to conspiracy theories. In the end, it is my sincere hope that when this proverbial dust settles, the community impact brings forth principled debate and civil public discourse, and ultimately leaves a positive effect on the city of Minneapolis, the state of Minnesota, and the United States. But nevertheless, while this court may consider the community impact, it is for these very same reasons that the court must turn to the foundational legal principles and remember that justice is blind. Law is built on reason and common sense, and it cannot be permitted to be assailed by public opinion. Turning to the second consideration, which is the victim impact, the death of George Floyd. The death of George Floyd was tragic. He is loved by his family members. He is loved by his friends. And his death is justifiably mourned by those whose lives he impacted. He is a son, a brother, a father, an uncle, and a friend to many. And as the court heard today, the impact and the loss of his life, simply just, it can't be simplified. And it will take time. Finally, Your Honor, the court must take into consideration, just like it has to take into consideration the aggravating factors, it needs to take into consideration the mitigating factors. And the mitigating factors as set forth by the sentencing guidelines really point to the TROG analysis, essentially, ultimately in this case. We're not going to spend a lot of time, again, arguing for a probationary sentence. That's briefed. But that being said, when we look at the TROG factors, who is Derek Chauvin? Derek Chauvin spent 19 years as a Minneapolis police officer. He loved being a police officer. I was contacted during the course of my representation and have had numerous conversations with his fellow police officers that worked with Derek, some retired, some still active. And they told me that he was a solid police officer, that he did his job, that if somebody asked him to do a particular task, he never complained, he did it. One of his sergeants told me that if I had asked him to dig a ditch for 8 hours, he would have picked up a shovel and he would have never complained for a second. He would have done his job. He was decorated as a police officer, multiple life-saving awards. He was decorated for valor. He was proud to be a police officer because what he liked to do was help people. And as the statistics show, the vast majority of police work is helping people. He was proud to be a Minneapolis police officer. He served his country as in the United States Army. And he too is a son, and a brother, and a father, and a friend. He too, his life, the life he's lived, he's not coming into this as a career criminal with 6 points, 5 points, 4 points. He's coming into this never having violated the law because he lived an honorable life and he attempted to live an honorable life. Derek Chauvin was not even scheduled to work on May 25th, 2020. He volunteered because there was short staffing at the time. I know from numerous conversations that I've had with Derek that his brain is littered with what ifs. What if I just had not agreed to go in that day? What if things had gone differently? What if I never responded to that call? What if? The truth of the matter is, and the end result is that we are here after a jury verdict, finding him guilty of these offenses. And the court's consideration should not only be focused on the aggravating factors, but the mitigating factors as well. The Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines Commission was established for a reason. And yes, the court in circumstances like these has discretion to go beyond and aggravate a sentence beyond the presumptive sentences established by the sentencing guidelines. But the sentencing guidelines don't differentiate between second-degree murders. Someone robs a liquor store, a police officer is involved in an incident, and a person dies in police custody. The law presumes, the legislature presumes that the sentencing guidelines as established is a sufficient penalty for all of the second-degree murder categories or cases you would see. From 2019 back to 2010, a total of 90 people were sentenced for second-degree murder. Those sentences, those people, there were more than that, but people who had a 0 criminal history score, more than 90 people were sentenced. 67% or 60 of those 90 people received a guideline sentence of 150 months. So 2/3 of all people in this same position received a guideline sentence. 20% received an aggravated sentence, 18 of the 90, and 13% or 12 individuals were granted mitigated departures. So if the legislature and the intent of the sentencing guidelines is to eliminate sentencing disparity, the law should presume that the guideline sentence is what is appropriate in this case. Judge may take into consideration at this point those aggravating factors, but you have to counterbalance them, which is the goal of the law, with the mitigating factors. I know that this has been an incredibly difficult case for the Floyd family to have to endure. The state of Minnesota, likewise, the prosecutors in this case have endured quite a bit, as has Mr. Chauvin's family. This is a case that has changed the world to some degree, and I hope it's positive. But it's my hope that the court follows the sentencing guidelines, applies the law in a reasoned manner, and imposes a just sentence.
Actually, Mr. Chauvin, would you join Mr. Nelson at the lectern? Mr. Chauvin, this is your opportunity if you wish to give any input to the court. And so I turn it over to you and your attorney.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, due to some additional legal matters at hand, I'm not able to give a full formal statement at this time. But very briefly, though, I do want to give my condolences to the Floyd family. There's going to be some other information in the future that would be of interest. And I hope things will give you some peace of mind. Thank you.
And I'll note that I did read your comments in the pre-sentence investigation as well.
Thanks, Ron.
All right, we are going to take a 15-minute recess so that I can complete the sentencing order based on what I've heard today. And let's reconvene at 2:45. We're in recess.
And there you hear it, Judge Cahill ordering a 15-minute recess right now. This is the sentencing of former Minneapolis police officer.
There you have it, folks. The judge is going to be back at 2:45, and he's going to make a decision on this case and decide what the sentencing should be. What do you think it should be? Do you think he should go for 20, 25 years? Some people say. Some people say he should go for life, even though he's a police officer. That shouldn't matter, or or you know, who he is.
Mm-hmm.
A person was killed. A person's life was taken. Now, George Floyd did have some things going on in his life. We cannot and must not deny that. But for this to happen this way, they had the man in their custody. He was down and out. So what else did they want by holding him on the ground and rubbing their knee on his face and his neck and choking him out? And all the other officers sitting on him and things like that, from his back to his butt to his feet. And what else were they trying to do? I don't understand. They had him in custody. What else were they trying to do?
And that's my whole thing, man. It's, to me, it doesn't even matter what George Floyd did, per se. It really doesn't to me, or what he had going on in this particular case.
Mm-hmm.
Because no matter what it was,
yeah,
the police had him in custody. And at that point, it's their responsibility for his well-being.
Mm-hmm.
As I think Greg pointed out a little earlier. And they failed in that task. And not only failed, they were the reason he died.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically Derek Chauvin. And all this other stuff with his mother talking. I don't know how much less I personally could have cared to hear what she had to say. But of course, both sides get equal opportunity to make some statements. And I don't even know why they let Derek Chauvin talk for the few seconds that he did. But at the end there, what was that supposed to be?
Yeah,
like what he'd have been better off not saying anything. To me, I mean, that little bit about I can't say this, I can't say that, but my condolences to the Floyd family. What are you talking about? Just stop talking. Don't, to me, they would have been better off if he just didn't say anything at all.
Okay, do we have a call?
No,
Okay.
no, that's my phone.
Okay. I mean, what was that all about? Him making a comment. Maybe that would lighten the sentencing. The judge hear from the person that is, that's being sentenced, accused.
It's ridiculous. It didn't make any sense. All this stuff about I can't say nothing, but I'm gonna go ahead and say something. Which basically said nothing, and giving condolences. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
It couldn't have been more empty, in my opinion. But anyway, I'm gonna look at some comments here. Frankie said his mother said he is her favorite son. He's probably her only son. She said, I call my only brother my favorite brother. So yeah, I believe that's the case. Frank, I don't know for sure, but for her to say that, I assume he's her only son. Looking here, Stanley, I think I put it up earlier, said sounds like he is throwing his client under the bus. I don't know if I saw that. Stanley, which is my opinion. I don't know if I.
Well, I was thinking a little bit along with that, Stanley. From the beginning of what he was starting to say, it didn't sound. He didn't sound all the way for his client to me.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, hey, well, it's been done. The sentencing stage is here. This is what it sounded like.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's going to get something. So, hey, whatever he gets, let's, I would just be satisfied with what he gets, but I'll do the best I can to make it sound better to the judge. That's the way it sounded to me.
Yeah, interesting. We got some more. Frankie says, I laughed when he said he wanted to give his condolences. I mean, I didn't laugh, but I thought I was like, what? It's just ridiculous to me. But I definitely get why you would laugh, because it's a joke. It's essentially a joke, what he tried to do there. Got Mark Leary says he should get life. No question about it. Stanley Fencer said life is not on the line here. And it doesn't seem like that's an option. But nonetheless, I don't disagree with what Mark says. Mark Leary also says he knew his job and he didn't do his job. and killed a man that wasn't fighting back. He needs to serve life, says Mark Leary. He also says that he's scared, and he says policing has changed over the last 10 years. And Mark, tell us what you mean by that. If you want to do it on the comments, also you see I put on the screen now, you can join the conversation via the phone lines. If you guys get the opportunity to, 901-213-6020 is the number to call if you want to call in and give your thoughts in the time we have here before the verdict of the sentencing comes down, which is estimated to be in the next 15 minutes or so. And that actually now within the next 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Because it's 2:35.
Well, 15 minutes. The judge is not, well, to me, the judge kind of, I think, have some idea of what he wants to do. 15 minutes is not a long time.
No.
To me. So the judge has in his mind, to me, what he thinks he wants to do, but he wanted to hear what this guy wanted to say today. Do you have anything to say for yourself? This is what the judge was saying today.
Yeah, basically.
I don't know, folks. This is going to be one of those situations to where, or is it one of those situations to where if the verdict comes down that he's only getting 10 years and he'll have to serve 3 years suspended or 10 years suspended and have to serve 3 years, however they do that. I only have to serve 3 years. What would the outrage be from people around the country? What would they think about that? Is that possible? I know people said 20, 25 years. Some say 18. And I don't think anybody went below 18 years. Would you be surprised that he only get 3 years, 10 years suspended and only have to serve 3 years? Because he's an ex-police officer and he was a good officer and all of that kind of stuff. And considering George Floyd's past and his record and all of those things, was the officer afraid? Was the officer afraid? Would they say the officer was fearful for his life?
Got a phone call. Let me see if I can. Before you answer there, let me get it over here on this end.
Call from
Richard Donnell.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2.
All right.
Okay, welcome to the show. We have attorney Richard Donnell from Jackson, Tennessee. And I know it's the last minute, Richard Donnell, and you're going to point your finger in my face. I know it. I'm ready for it. So, Attorney Donnell, man, did you just see
and welcome to
this situation? We want to welcome you to the show. And thanks for calling, by the way. What did you think about the situation?
Talking about what the defense attorney said and what Chauvin said. Is that what you're speaking about?
Yes, sir. What do you think?
No, I think they both said what they needed to say in the position that they are in. But I think it has no merit whatsoever, and I don't think that it will faze the judge. But as the defendant, as the defense attorney, they said what they need to say based upon the position that they are in.
So do you think that would help any?
No, I think that they went through the routine, went through the motions. I mean, you wouldn't expect the defense attorney to say, well, my client needs all the time you can give him. You would expect for him to say that it should be lenient, et cetera. Right. You would expect him to have his mother on to say how good of a guy he is. And you would expect for Chauvin to turn around to George Floyd's family and say some things to him. That's just what you do. That's the routine of what you do when you're trying to convince the judge to give you the least amount of time that he can give you. So all that's routine and all that's what's to be expected. but it's all callous and it's empty. And I don't believe the judge will abide by any of the things that they said.
Yeah.
Yeah, sir, now this is Josh here. I couldn't help but think we had the stream going while we're live here, and I'm watching, Derek Chauvin say he can't say this and I can't say that, but, I'm going to give my condolences and that's all. I can't help but think, and I know it's routine right now, I should expect that, but I can't help but think he would almost, to me, be better off saying nothing, because it's all it was to me, was nothing. I mean, it was clear, it was cold, it was pointless, and it's almost insulting for him to even try to do that. But I guess, again, that's to be expected. So
yeah, well, it is to be expected, and the reason why he did not say anything, and the reason why he said what he said, is that he wanted to be in the record somewhere that he did express remorse.
Yeah.
A lot of times the judge would say, well, this defendant didn't express any remorse whatsoever. So, his lawyer told him that he needed to say the base minimum so that the record could reflect that he did in some way express some type of remorse. That's all that was.
Okay. Attorney Richard Donnell from Jackson, Tennessee has joined us, and we appreciate you joining us on the show live today concerning Derek Chauvin's sentencing on the murder of police officer George Floyd.
George Floyd, yeah.
George Floyd,
mm-hmm.
Attorney Donnell, what do you think? Some people are saying 18, 20, 25 years. Would we be surprised to get anything less?
Yeah, I would. I think he's going to get at least 20 years is what I think is going to be. 30 years from what I've read is the maximum, and he may get that, but I don't think he will get anything less than 20 years though, because even though he doesn't have any kind of prior record, that murder was horrendous. I mean, laying on his neck for 9+ minutes, and the people the bystanders, all of them was asking him just to get off his neck. They weren't asking him to release the guy or take the handcuffs off. They were just asking him for one basic decent thing, to get off his neck so that the man can breathe.
Mm-hmm.
And he just refused to do it. He was very callous, very deliberate. He was nonchalant. And based upon all those things, I don't think that the judge will give less than 20 years. And he may get the maximum, but I don't think it'll be less than 20.
The judge came, he said he'll be back in 15 minutes. Now, probably a lot less than that for the sentencing. Don't you think that's not enough time in this case? But
it's enough for me.
It's enough for the judge, seemingly. That may be a point that he already has his mind up what he's going to do.
I think he probably does. He's had the probation department to prepare a pre-sentence report, and he has all the information he needed. The only thing he had to hear that he didn't already have was the victim impact statement that was made by the little girl and the nephew and the other person regarding George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
And he needed to hear from whether or not Chauvin was going to say anything, and he heard from Chauvin's mother. So all the information that he needs to decide what he thinks would be a fair sentence, he already has that. And so I don't read anything particularly into his delay in 15 minutes before he comes back out and render judgment.
10 years suspended to 3 years maximum in prison served. Do you think it's possible, or would now, if something like that happens, do you think we're going to have a national incident over this country over something like that?
Yeah, I think you would. Everybody's seen that tape, and everybody saw exactly what happened. He was murdered.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it wasn't just that he was killed because of the man's actions. He was murdered. And if the judge, in my opinion, were to come back and give probation that the defense attorney is asking, which he's doing his job, that's what he should ask for.
Mm-hmm.
I think would just not bode well for what might happen. I think the country would erupt if that were to occur.
Yeah. Now you think about it. Now George Floyd had a record, and he had some bad things going on in his life. And don't you think they're going to think about that as well? And
no, I don't think this judge will. That has nothing to do. That's totally irrelevant about what type of life he had or what he did in the past. That's totally irrelevant. A jury came back and determined that this man killed him, that this man murdered him. And whatever George Floyd had in his past is totally irrelevant. And the judge cannot look at that in any type of way to temper what sentence that is appropriate.
Yes, I agree, man, because if you look at, I know that's what a lot of people try to throw up in the past, not just with this situation, but other police-involved situations, right? What do you see the media do? They throw up their history, even going back to Trayvon Martin, right? They throw up the fact that he was in their trouble in school or whatever the case is. It's nothing to do with the actual incident. So hopefully that is, completely out of the scenario here. But how important do you think this is when it comes to future cases like this? Because we already know, there's several others that have already happened since the George Floyd trial. Police-involved shootings of Black men and people like that. How do you think this will impact future cases?
I really don't know. I would hope that it would impact it to where police officers in a similar situation would not behave and act like this. But since George Floyd's death, we've had a number of cases where police officers have acted exactly like they have in the past, as if it had no type of influence on their actions at all. So whether or not this will influence other officers, I hope it does, but I wouldn't count it out that it would do that.
Okay. Attorney Richard Donnell, we want to thank you for joining us today on Talk Back Live with Bob and George Live, and appreciate your last minute calling in for us there, and thanks for your information. Any last words you'd like to say, sir?
No, thank you for the opportunity, and we'll see in a little bit what happens in the case. But thank you for having me on, and I'll talk to you later.
Thank you, Attorney Richard Donnell. Thanks.
All right. Okay. Bye.
All right. Yeah, glad to have him on. Last minute, let him text in there, and so he called right quick.
Yeah, great insight, man, on the fly
indeed.
there from an attorney, the guy that's seen plenty of this stuff. I know both y'all former co-hosts back in the day as well.
Yeah, WJAK 1460 Radio, Jackson, Tennessee. Yes, and FM 96 Kicks. Yeah, back in the day. And so Attorney Richard Donnell, good guy. And so we're glad to have him on.
Absolutely. And we're still keeping an eye on the courtroom right now. They are showing a picture of the seal, but there's still, the judge is not back in the courtroom as of yet, but it's been a little over 15 minutes, about 17 minutes now. And we're still waiting for the judge to re-enter the courtroom, but we still have time for you guys. If you got plenty of y'all watching right now, if you want to give a call and give your thoughts on the situation, what do you think is a good sentence for Derek Chauvin in your opinion? Yes. Plus, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry. Stanley Festa, he said whatever he get, to him it'll be life.
Yeah.
So
probably.
Because, he didn't, this guy, police officer, he's not used to anything. He's used to arresting people, but he's not used to serving it. I'm not used to serving time in jail, man, but, that shouldn't be, making any decision on what they do to this guy.
But I think what Stanley's saying, whatever time he gets will be life, meaning he thinks he's going to die in there. I think that's what you mean.
You think somebody's gonna whip him up?
Yeah. Is that what you mean, Stanley? Let us know, because I wouldn't be surprised at all. Not just the fact that he's a police officer, but with the high charge situation. And you almost wonder, will he get some type of special treatment? Meaning, will they try to isolate him from the general population, so to speak? Because they tend to do that sometimes with high profile situations. But if I was them, I don't see why you wouldn't throw him in there with the general population. But nonetheless, I guess we'll see what happens when that goes down.
Notori Emery says 30 years.
Yes. Just 30 years. And also says, let me see, this should put police officers on notice. The days of rogue officers are over. Okay.
Wow.
Notori thinks it's over.
Rogue. So what do you mean? today, Richard Attorney Darnell says police officers are still doing the same thing that they were doing a few years ago. Don't seem like there's been any change. So do you think this is going to help change the situation, or do you see any change in police officers around the country? And our line is open as well, 901-213-6020. If you'd like to get in real quick before the judge get back in the courtroom. And he's going to, 15 minutes. Sound like to me the judge had his mind made up.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I'm looking here. You can see on the screen, ABC News putting up this. Says aggravating factors: abused position of power and authority, particularly cruel, presence of children, and committed crime with the active participation of.
Yeah, he ought to get sentenced for all of those things. It shouldn't be no 2 years for each one of them.
No way.
Yeah.
And that's just aggravated factors. Oh, that's added to the charges.
Yeah.
Potentially added to the charges. So I'm sure, that's probably some of the reason why the judge is taking his time. Because he has to calculate everything according to the charge to make sure it all goes down right. So Frankie says he would never be put in general population. He would be killed before the sun goes down.
Oh my, Frankie.
I actually agree.
Oh gosh.
But do you think, Bob, should that keep him from going to general population?
No, absolutely. This is prison.
Yeah.
This is for doing wrong. Whatever you do wrong, you suffer the consequences. If you put this man in any other place other than the public population, then you're doing him a favor. It's just like telling people you do certain things. Certain people can do certain things and break the law and kill and murder, but yet we're not going to punish you as we punish other citizens that go to prison.
Oh, the judge is back.
Okay, the judge is back, folks. Let's go into the courtroom.
Really appreciated that you took the time to stay with this case and to provide me with input. I have reviewed the pre-sentence investigation and carefully considered all the facts of the case and the law, but my comments are actually going to be very brief because most of it's going to be in writing. I have a 22-page memorandum that is going to be attached to the sentencing order. And why am I doing it in writing? To emphasize the fact that determining the appropriate sentence in any case, and in this case, is a legal analysis. It's applying the rule of law to the facts of an individual and specific case. And that is why, as opposed to trying to being profound here on the record, I prefer that you read the legal analysis that explains how I determined the sentence in this case. What the case is, or what the sentence is not based on, is emotion or sympathy. But at the same time, I want to acknowledge the deep and tremendous pain that all the families are feeling, especially the Floyd family. You have our sympathies. And I acknowledge and hear the pain that you are feeling. I acknowledge the pain not only of those in this courtroom, but the Floyd family who are outside this courtroom and other members of the community. It has been painful throughout Hennepin County, throughout the state of Minnesota, and even the country. But most importantly, we need to recognize the pain of the Floyd family. I'm not going to attempt to be profound or clever because it's not the appropriate time. I'm not basing my sentence also on public opinion. I'm not basing it on any attempt to send any messages. A trial court judge, the job of a trial court judge is to apply the law to specific facts and to deal with individual cases. And so, Mr. Chauvin, as to count one, based on the verdict of the jury, finding you guilty of unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony under Minnesota Statute .19 subdivision 2 paren 1. It is the judgment of the court that you now stand convicted of that offense. Pursuant to Minnesota statute section 60904, counts 2 and 3 will remain unadjudicated as they are lesser offenses of count 1. As sentenced for count 1, the court commits you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 270 months. That's 270. That is a 10-year addition to the presumptive sentence of 150 months. This is based on your abuse of a position of trust and authority, and also the particular cruelty shown to George Floyd. You're granted credit for 199 days already served. Pay the mandatory surcharge of $78 to be paid from prison wages. You're prohibited from possessing firearms, ammunition, or explosives for the remainder of your life. Provide a DNA sample as required by law. Register as a predatory offender as required by law. And then you will receive a copy of the order and also the attached memorandum explaining the court's analysis. Anything further from the state?
If this needs to be said, we just ask that it be executed forthwith.
Defendant is remanded to the custody of the sheriff to be transported back to the DOC or whichever custody is currently holding him. Anything from the defense? No, Your Honor. All right. Thank you. We are adjourned.
And there you have it, the sentence passed down from Judge Peter Cahill. He said that his words would be brief, and they were. 22 and a half years. When you add up the months that he just mentioned there, that is the sentence for Derek Chauvin for killing George Floyd on that day last year in Minneapolis. Let's get right back to Deb Roberts, who's with us in the studio. You've been hearing from people about their expectations.
All right, 22 and a half years in prison for the death of George Floyd. This is what Derek Chauvin is going to get. So that's less than
the max of 30.
But he already was sentenced. He's already served so many 199 days. What is that? What, less than a year?
Yeah,
half a year or so, whatever that is.
So y'all can let us know, but I believe, looking at the comments here, with Frank Stanley and some other folks, just I believe what he has left to serve is basically about 22 years.
About 22, 22 and a half years, what the judge is saying. But he would have served probably 30. And so they took that off. So that's what he's going to actually serve now, 22 and a half years in prison.
Now, it wouldn't have been 30 because you take off 199, that's less than a year.
Okay.
So maybe,
that's right. That's
so it wouldn't
probably been about 23, 24 years. So sorry, you're correct on that. Thank you for correcting me on that. But do you think 22 and a half years is fair? Some of the people were saying 18, 20, 25, and he did get in the 20, 25 year range. Do you think he should have gotten the death penalty? What do you think he should have gotten? Was the judge too hard on Derek Chauvin, the ex-police officer in Minnesota? Do you think he was too hard on the sentencing?
He definitely wasn't that.
And do you think he got what he deserved? 901-213-6020. And Frankie says, I always thought at least 20.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And Stanley said that would be life. So there it is. He's saying that's still life, in his opinion. Lee Johnson, what's up, Lee, man? He's watching. He says, this is right when they said it here. He said 270 months. I want to do the quick math. And I was thinking the same thing, like, man, why are they saying this in months? Because now we got to get our calculator out and try to divide all these years.
And if it's really not enough and not fair, by the time you calculate it up after you listening to the judge, by the time you do that, the judge is gone.
Yeah.
So he can't, wait a minute, whoa, it's after the fact, he only got 6 years.
Yeah.
No, but Do you think it's fair? That's a lot of months.
Yeah.
You know, it's only 12 months in a year, so you calculate up what 270.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. But do you think Derek Chauvin, the ex-police officer, got what he deserved?
Now, the Tory say he's still got a few cases pending,
Mm-hmm.
so it's probably not over. As far as
okay, so what does that mean? He could get more added to this?
Potentially. I had to let somebody else answer that, but y'all let us know what else he could be facing there. But all I know is, I mean, according to what they said was possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have to go by that. What they say was possible, the maximum was 30 years that he could face based on the guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
And for him to get 22 out of 30, I think that is fair.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a solid sentence.
Now,
I wouldn't want to do 22 years, so that's no cakewalk at all.
I wouldn't want to do the half part of his 22.
Yeah, yes.
But is this with probation? I mean, is there a probationary period here?
I don't know if that could be determined later. But I know he had to serve plenty of time before that's even a possibility.
Yeah.
But I didn't hear nothing.
I didn't hear nothing about that. So it may be that he had to serve all that time.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that's the case. Yeah, and I say hopefully, folks, this would bring a lesson and teach a lesson to other officers, especially other police officers around the country that would do such a thing like this. And, yeah.
Frankie says he has a separate case that is pending that involves a 14-year-old victim.
Oh.
Wow, so that's a whole nother case.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. So, wow. So this guy, he's gone forever.
Yeah, much as his mother's talking about, what a wonderful child he is.
What a wonderful guy he is. Yeah, so. But hey, he is on his way back to prison, and he's going to be there for a while, and he deserves to be there. So, and somebody said, "Well, you're a preacher talking about somebody shit he deserves." No, this is what you get. You know, people in the Bible were sentenced, and back in the day, it was worse than what he got today. I mean, they would kill you.
People that are dumb enough to say you were a preacher talking about that, you're just an idiot. First of all, just straight up, you're a doggone idiot. If you say, "Oh, you're a preacher, can't say that," but you're just stupid.
Yeah,
and even deserve to be addressed at all because you don't know what you're talking about. But let me throw this out here real quick. The 14-year-old, because I was curious about what that situation is. Just checked it out. So listen to this, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
This was on May 7th, 2021. Derek Chauvin was indicted in the arrest of a 14-year-old whom prosecutors say he knelt on for 17 minutes and then hit him with a flashlight.
No.
So he's facing a civil rights charge in the violent arrest of a 14-year-old back in 2017.
Wow.
The prosecutors say Chauvin hit the boy with a flashlight and knelt on his back and neck for 17 minutes.
Well, what happened to the child?
I'm still reading this.
Okay.
So let me see. Chauvin is accused of using his authority as an officer to deprive the teen of his rights.
Mm-hmm.
So a federal grand jury has indicted him on this. And so this is pretty wild here. And this all just came to light during the murder trial, that this was also another case. They say, here it is. Chauvin and another officer had been called to the teen's house after his mother reported that her two children had assaulted her.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's interesting. According to the filing, the officers told the boy who was lying on the floor that he was under arrest.
Mm-hmm.
And Chauvin then struck him several times with a flashlight before putting him in the prone position. Chauvin hit.
Was there a reason why he struck the guy with the flashlight?
Well, let me keep going.
Okay.
Chauvin hit the boy with the flashlight, then grabbed his throat and hit him in the head with it again. Good grief. According to the filing, the teen called out for his mother and for the officers to stop hurting him, the indictment said. He bled from his left ear and was later hospitalized to get stitches, according to the filing. Videos of the arrest first surfaced last year, but did not lead to state charges.
Wow.
So this is interesting. What do y'all think about that?
Wow, that man is crazy. He deserves he deserves what he's getting today and more. And whenever that case goes to trial, they need to put him under the jail. You know,
because look, here's the key.
And no telling, Judge, how many other officers around this country out there
have done similar things,
or that are doing similar things
Yeah.
right now. They're getting away. Well, after today, I think the judge put the hammer down. That if you get caught as an officer doing this crazy stuff that you're doing out there, we're going to put the hammer down on you.
Well, I hope, because there's different judges in different states.
Yeah.
And, different guidelines. But nonetheless.
Well, this will hopefully put fear in their heart that they would not even think about doing it.
That's true. Frankie says Chauvin has to serve 2/3 of his sentence before he's eligible for parole.
Okay, 2/3. All right. Well, there you go. And I don't know if he's going to be good in prison or not. Those people in prison may not let him be good.
Well, again, they're probably not going to keep him in general population.
No, they need to put him in general population. And, if he get his tail whipped, then, hey, so be it. This is all a part of punishment. This is all a part of committing a crime, and that's exactly what he did. He murdered someone. So, as the general population has to put up with it, so should the police officer or ex-officer. There shouldn't be any, favors.
Yeah.
In this situation.
Now, what I'm gonna do here, if I can, I want to play a little bit of just the news report here, just to hear what they're talking about before we get out of here.
Okay, listen, folks.
We know our history. It's one step forward, lots of steps back. But the country is awakened to this issue in a new way. George Floyd likely, let's hope, did not die in vain.
Terry, thank you. And we're seeing more people there in Minneapolis showing up at that memorial site. Deb, I want to go back to you. We were actually talking before the sentencing hearing began about healing and what this would actually mean for healing the country that has been through so much over the course of the last year. Ben Crump himself says one step closer to healing. And I see you've been talking to a lot of people about this.
Well, I think for so many people, it's hard not to feel the personal effects of this. Even as Terry just talked about, we all went through this trauma, not just Black people. And I'm the mom of a Black son, and I certainly have felt it. But we all witnessed this, and we went through this case and this trial. So it's been a traumatic time, I think, for a lot of people. We know that there's still more charges to come, more officers to face charges in this case. But this kind of closes the chapter on this part of the George Floyd story. And I do believe that for some people, there will be some measure of satisfaction. Doesn't happen very often, particularly when it is a Black person who was lost at the hands of police. But I think for a number of people, and certainly I would say for this mom, it is nice to see that this case is sort of put to rest, at least for now. And I think that for a lot of people, this will be maybe some measure of healing.
Like you said, closing one chapter. There still is more to this story.
Absolutely.
Deborah, thank you so much. And thanks to our entire team for the coverage of Derek Chauvin's sentencing, 22 and a half years in prison. Our coverage on this story continues on ABC News Live.
All right. And some have figured out that he would be 60 years old when he gets out.
Yep.
Man, that's, I don't know.
That's
60
rough.
years old. Well, what good is that going to do?
Well, look, those are prime years of your life, man. If you're in his 40s or 38, I'm assuming, and up to 60, that's knocking out some prime years right there.
Yeah,
behind bars. So that's no joke.
Yeah.
Now looking at the Tory puts a long comment here, but says one count in the separate indictment alleged on the September 4th, 2017. This is with the 14-year-old. And it seemed like some of what I just read here. Without legal justification, held the juvenile by the throat and struck juvenile 1 multiple times in the head with a flashlight. This offense included the use of a dangerous weapon, a flashlight, and resulted in bodily injury to juvenile 1. So it sounds like this is from the indictment. The second count alleged that Chauvin held a knee on the neck and the upper back of the teenager, even after the teenager was lying prone. So I guess the thing is, no matter what the teenager did, because if the mother's calling the police on 2 teenagers assaulting her, her kids, that's a little weird. But nonetheless, even if they were doing that, if they got him down, if the police comes in the situation and justifiably are involved, right? Let's say the teens were abusing their mother, and the police bust in and they take them both down. That's nothing wrong with that. But when you're holding a kid by the throat and beating him with a flashlight, after you have him detained.
Well, I don't know. Did they have him detained, or was the teen fighting a little bit? Now, if the teen was kicking and fighting, and all this kind of stuff, and cussing the officer out and still cussing his mother out while the officer's there, and that type of thing happens. So then I could understand. I could see why, the officer.
Well, the thing is, it don't matter what you say. And I get, look, I'm not going to try to defend if the kid's doing something to his mama. But what I'm saying is, if you have him down, according to the report,
okay,
and he's on the ground, you don't need to beat him with a flashlight.
Yeah,
you
need
to get him up and get him out of there.
Right. If that's the case, police officers, you're
just trying to get some free shots.
If you got handcuffs on the people, what's the use, and what are you trying to gain by beating the person up after you've got them handcuffed? You have them in custody already. So what else is an officer trying to gain by continuing to beat up a person that is in custody? It's what they are when they're handcuffed. They can't do anything. So hopefully this will calm the situation down with officers across the country, and that this thing, would get better in what's going on. All right, folks, we appreciate you joined us today. Thanks for our guest joining us earlier, Attorney Richard Donnell from Jackson, Tennessee. Some good comments and things on this situation. And that's going to do it for us today, Josh. And we'll get back with you again and for another edition of Talk Back Live with Bob and Josh. Y'all have a wonderful day today and enjoy your weekend.